Bruchim Aboim B'Shem Hashem, B'Shem Irgen Shir, I'd like to welcome everyone to today's shir from Harav Yaakov Zes Shlita on Gazel and Minim on the first days of Sukkos. The Sukkos is sponsoring a shir called Irgen Shir, 718-851-8651 or email ist@yeshivanet.com. Harav Smith.
We had a shiloh once where someone came to shul the first day of Yomtov, Sukkos, and he realized he didn't bring along his aravos. Either he left them home or he dropped them on the way. But he had an idea downstairs during the weeks before Yomtov. There was someone selling Gazel and Minim. Maybe he'll find 2 aravos. And he saw there was aravos in a bucket. So he decided that he's allowed to take it without rishus. He's Meir Heta. And Lamaisa, after he made a bracha the first day, someone told him, maybe it wasn't right. It wasn't yours. You didn't buy it. You're assuming you're allowed to take it. Don't forget, you have to have lachem. And he got all nervous, and he wanted to know what's the halacha. He borrowed the aravos that weren't his. Then I had probably a more challenging shiloh where someone came to shul, made a bracha, finished davening, and he came home. He realized that he took his son-in-law's koishiklach, so he basically used his son-in-law's aravos and hadasim, and not his own. And that was the first day. Now he got along very well with his Adam. Don't get me wrong, but Lamaisa, it wasn't his. So I decided this is going to be a perfect pre-Yomtov sugya. We always have a minig that we give them something gishmak to take home. The whole sugya is gishmak. These shilas and probably a dozen more related to what's called the sugya of lachem. Basically, the Mishnah says in Sukkah Mem Aleph from the Beis, when in the times of the Mikdash they would take Gazel and Minim even on Shabbos, when the first day. But there was a problem, because if everybody brought their Gazel and Minim before Shabbos, and they put it all together, what's going to come? They come Shabbos, how do you know which is yours? So you end up taking someone else's Gazel and Minim. So the Mishnah warns that bring your loving before Shabbos, but Shabbos, when it comes the first day Yomtov, kol echad v'echad makir es shaloi. Don't mistakenly take someone else's Gazel and Minim. Make sure you take your own. Why? Why can I use someone else? Why can we have a little achdus, like Kol used to all the Klai Yisrael could sit in one sukkah? Why can we all use each other's Gazel and Minim? But Meisha Amru Chachamim, this is probably the most important lines for today. The Chachamim said, "Ein Adam Yoytze de Chayvasai b'Yomtov Rishon b'Lulavei Shel Chaveira." This is packed with information. Chachamim said it. You're not Yoytze on the first day with someone else's lulav. You notice it doesn't say hadasim or aravos. The question is, why, Taka, is it wrong to use someone else's? Sukkah, you're allowed to use someone else's. But the question is stronger, because the Mishnah points out that Yomtov Rishon is dafka the only day that's a problem. The rest of Yomtov, you're yaitzu with someone else's lulav. So now we have a double question. Why is it possible? And if it's possible, why the second day is the rest of Yomtov is better? And the Gemara Taka asked this kasha, and the Gemara says, since the Torah says lakachtem lachem b'yoyim harishon, the lachem misha lachem, it has to be yours. And again, the Gemara repeats that statement: mikan amru chachamim, you're not yaitza Yomtov Rishon the lavei shel chaveira. Now, this we know, it's the same Gemara, that a Gazel, if you stole something, you're certainly not Yoitza. Because that's Takta and Ava, that's a mitzvah of Aveira. But here we're saying it's really, Lachem means it's not yours, but you didn't steal it. You borrowed it, She'ila. The Balabas gave you B'tshu Aschei, and he's very happy to give it to you. But that's the Gzeres HaKasiv, that on the first day Yomtiv, it has to be lachem. If you borrowed something, you're shaking his Gazel and Minim, and that's no good. Now, this is Shulchan Aruch, 2 places, Taf Reish Mem Tes Sif Beis and Taf Reish Nun Ches Sif Zayin, that you're not yoitza, even with a valid she'ilah. In other words, Gazel, of course, is wrong, but we're not talking to Gazlanim here. You borrowed it, and he gave it to you b'simcha, but you're not yaitza with someone else's dalaminim on the first day. Now, I must mention that although the Mishnah and Gemara use the lashon amru chachamim, it's not meduyik, because it's a deraisa, it's lachem. The Tiferes Yisrael points out that sometimes the Chazal use that lashon chacham because Chacham explained it, and he sends you to Zvachim Samachtes Ayin Sham. But let's be clear, we're talking about today whether you yaitza or not is a psul deraisa if it's not lachem. Also, I want to be ma'aseh maidah when I say today the first day, I mean the first day in Eretz Yisrael, because the rest of the days are only drabanan. In Chutz La'aretz, according to most paiskim, this din of lachem is even on the second day of Yomtov, because the first and second day are like one. So if I say a shigri delish the first day, I mean first days. In Chutz La'aretz, first and second day. Now, Lamaisa, if so, both of our shaylos that we began with are problematic. He wasn't yaitza. If it wasn't lachem, you'd have to, not only weren't yaitza, but the bracha could be labatala. You have to repeat the bracha. Oh, but you might say, what might be the redeeming factor, the Mishnah, the Gemara, Shulchan Aruch, in all places, so you're not yaitza belulavai shel chaverai. Maybe we'll suggest that aravos or hadasim, it doesn't belong to you, maybe is not terrible, but that's senseless. Iba yisei mekra, iba yisei mesvara. First of all, iba yisei svara, it's one mitzvah. It's 4 parts to one mitzvah. So if the aravos are not yours, so then you don't have an arava. But more than that, iba yisei mekra, it's a fair shepasik. L'kachtem lachem b'yam rishon, pri-eitzah, the kapis marmana, anafeizav, zavi nacha. So the psul of lachem is said exactly to all 4 of the minim. Now, that is pashit. And I saw the Sharatzian in Tov Reish Nun Ches Sif Yud Gimel, Sif Kat Yud Gimel. He bemoans the fact that people spend a hoin rav for hadas, for lulav and esrig, and even hadasim is more expensive, and he gets the best. When it comes to aravos, he takes a laid-back attitude. He comes to the next day, the first day of Yomtov, to the Shammah, give me aravos, he handles with him. I once saw someone by a soicha, and someone bought an expensive set, and then he wanted aravos. So the soicha said, okay, it's $3 on each arava. He goes, why can you throw it in? Why are you such a cheapskate? Why can you throw it in for free? I think he did the wrong thing. You forced the fellow to be moichel against his will, then it's not really lachem. It might even be gazel. I don't know. But it's definitely not lachem if he doesn't sell a b'leiv shalom. And by the way, if he's cheap, so why are you cheap? So pay the extra few dollars. He's paid so much for the dalaminim. Now, I'm not saying you shouldn't give it for free, but the Sharatzian's concern is if the aravos are not lachem, it's the same psul. So why did the Mishnah and the Gemara and Shulchan Aruch repeatedly use the lashon lulavai shel chaverai? So that's not shver. L'maisa the bracha is tilas lulav hagazel. For some reason, since lulav is the main of the minim, we talk about lulav, but there's no doubt about it. All 4 minim have to be lachem. If one of them are not, so there goes the mitzvah. Now, l'maisa, just for a moment, I want to mention the psul of gazel. Obviously, it's not a gear to us. Hopefully, we might see some cases that are inadvertently gezela, but gazel is more chomer than a lack of lachem. I mean, besides that gazel is not lachem, but there's also the element of mitzvah b'aveira, which the Yishalmi in the 3rd parak in Sukkos says, oy loy lezeh shesaniguria nasa kategoria. What he thinks is a schos is really his prosecutor. Gazel, the Baruch Shalom hates Sayne Gazel, and Beitzei Berach Niyatz Hashem. But the Chiddush is, the Ramah says this in Tov Reish Mem Tes Sif Hey, that Gazel is possible all 7 days. Lachem is nothing wrong with it, just it's not yours. That's the first days. But Gazel, it is something terribly tainted about the Dalet Minim, and that will be possible all 7 days. But getting back to Shaul, as we said, a lack of Lachem, Tov Reish Mem Tes Beis, Tov Reish Nun Chazayin, is possible only the first day. Now, the obvious problem, of course, is Ma yasa ben, what should a person do who doesn't have dalat minim? Today, Baruch Hashem, we all have dalat minim, but there was a time not long ago in history that many people couldn't afford it, number one, or very commonly, it wasn't available. You had to import it, it just didn't, it wasn't negeya in many, many places to have many different sets. So the question is, what could they do? If you don't have a dalat minim, you can't be yoytze to the mitzvah. So we have the next words in the Gemara that I mentioned, Mem Aleph and Mem Beis, that if you borrowed someone's dalat minim, you're not yoytze. But if he gives you b'matana, a full-fledged matana, so now it's yours. So now it's lachem. But the Gemara expands that greatly. Lav dafka gave you a matana gemura, here, keep it, have a nice day, enjoy it. Even if what's called matana manas lahachzir, which means he gave it to you fully, it's yours. But you have to give it back. So that, the Gemara says, also works. Even though it's not an eternal kinyan, not a matana forever, but since it was a complete kinyan, so when you shook the dalat minim that day, it was lachem, it was yours. The fact that you have to give it back is immaterial. So now we have the following 4 different levels. Sha'ol is definitely not good the first day. Gazel, all the days is possible. Matana gemura is fine. The new chiddush is matana manas lahachzir. Now I want to just crystallize the point a little bit to make it more gishmak. Let's say someone doesn't have dalat minim, and you have a set, and you're willing to give it to him the first day, because you realize that it will work out very nicely, because he davens v'sikin, you daven in the 8:30 minyan, so you know what, you use it in the minyan, and then you give it back to me. I'm giving it to you, you could use it because of the 8, it's yours for those 2 hours, but I must have it back. So this is a rush. Shulchan Aruch quotes in Tavashnun Chesiv Gimel that if you didn't give it to him a matana amanas lahachzer, but you gave it to him for 2 hours, he's not yoytze. Why? So here's the chap that you have to understand. When I used the mechanics of matana amanas lahachzer, Rabbis, you have to realize this is Pashut Pshat. When I give it to him, he's koine it, and it becomes his entirely, completely. When he has to give it back to Mekayim the Tanai, so the way the Rosh stresses, and the Ramah makes a point of using this lashon, he is giving you a matana. He's giving you his. And you, the Bailim, at least the Bailim a few minutes ago, you have to make a new Kinyan on a matana. It's pretty demeaning. You have a $300 set, you give it to someone that can't afford a dalat minim, it's his, and now you're hoping he gives you back a matana. Why? Because it was his 100%. I was only limited until I'm an asla hachzer. Doesn't make a difference. When he shook it, it was his entirely, and when you get it back, you have to make a kinyan gomer. Otherwise, you're not yoytze. But when you give it to him, use it and give it back to me, it's basically a bona fide she'ela. You didn't make a kinyan, he didn't make kinyan, and you don't have to make a kinyan. And the biggest raya is, when I speak in matana manas lahachzir, I the Bailam, I have to make a new kinyan. When I give it to him, and give it back to me soon, and you don't make a matana manas lahachzir, it's a she'ela lizman, and the kinyan, whatever kinyan he made, self-destructs, and I get it back without a kinyan. And that's no good. And as we'll soon see, I hope I'm wrong, but I don't think I'm wrong, if let's say is a fella in shul, he loves lending his dalat minim the first day, he's a very generous person, and before he davens, he gives other people to do with it, and you ask him, by the way, you've been doing this for years, it's nice, will you kinda back your dalat minim before you shook the first day? He goes, oh, don't come with that yeshiva shtick, I don't believe in that, I don't be kinda, come on, ridiculous, it's mine, I have to be kinda. If he said that, I wonder if he was ever yoytze to the mitzvah. If he wasn't kind it back. Now again, if the one that used it made a kinyan gomer halacha, he was yoytze. But our generous fellow, loyamoritz chassid, you need a kinyan gomer. And that's why lamaisa, the Rosh in Sukkah, Perigimel Simel Lamed, that when the borrower, actually I should say the borrower, the one that's taking it, gives it back to the Bailim, he has to give matana gemura. It goes both ways. You give it to the one that's using it. He has to make Kinyan gomer, and he gives it back to you. So we call him the borrower, but that's really inaccurate. It belongs. It becomes his. It's lachem. He's yoitza, and then you have to do yours, and you have to be yoitza. Now this is the Shulchan Aruch in Tov Reish Nun Ches, Ramah and Sif Hey. Tzarich laz litnei b'mayla b'matana. But you gave it him for 2 hours as a she'ila, does not work. Now I do know the famous Tzarich Achoshin, Reish Ma'alav Dalet, says that if you gave it to him for 2 hours as a matana, it should work, but he's arguing on the Rosh and on the Ramah and the Nesivos HaMishpat on the Ktsois. Says the Ik is like the Rosh and the Ritva, that if you give it to him for 2 hours as a partial matana, that won't work. That's matana gemura amanas lahachs. Okay, now Baruch Hashem that we have the Yisoidis, let's apply this lamais. One case that could be not only a problem of lachem, but even Gazel. I hope this is not negeya, but sometimes it might be. A person buys a very expensive set. So far, so good. Now, it's a lot of money. So he says, okay, I'll pay you tomorrow. And the vendor's looking for his payment. Tomorrow, yesh mochel achazman. Bekitza, before you know it, it turns out it's Yomtov, and he didn't pay. And the vendor is unforgiving. You've made up you're going to pay, you're not paying. So Lamaisa, in that case, if he didn't pay, and the vendor did not agree to be makted to him bechinam, it's very possible. Not only is not lachem, but it's a shel shalem midas gazlanu. So Lamaisa, you say, oh, it was a soich's fault. Why is it a soich's fault? He's allowed to make an innocent sale. You didn't pay. And the Mishtabur and Tov Reish Nun Chesif Katan Yud, he says that those that buy it and don't pay for it could be the not yoitza. Now he does add the following: even though the buyer, if you're allowed to call him that, took it into his house and made kinyanim, but those kinyanim only work midrabanan. Midaraisa, the only thing that works midraisa is kesef. And then he says, even if you take it into the chotzer, which is an independent kinyan, don't rely on that. Now if you look at the Mata Ephraim, Tov Reish Chafei Sif Yud Zayin, he says, because Lamaisa, it seems that what he means to say, that the Rav says Pshat in the Mata Ephraim is, if he didn't get paid, he doesn't want to give it to you. So if he's not being makted to you, it's not yours. So here you have a case, potentially, is definitely not lachem, but it could even be a lulav hagazel. The Shevet HaLevi in Chelik Zayin, Pei Gimel explains this. He's not makne b'leiv shalom. How do you expect to be yoitza? In a later tshuva, in Shevet HaLevi Yud Aleph Shin Chavav, he says, if the moicha expected or demanded the money before Yomtiv, and you didn't pay, how could you be yoitza on Yomtiv? And he tells an interesting story. It was someone went out Erev Yomtiv. You know, these vendors, they come and they go, and he bought a nice Arba Minim. He didn't have money with him. He says, okay, give me a few minutes, I'll be right back. He runs home, but he doesn't rush. He comes back, the fellow already left. It was Erev Yomtiv, he's not going to stay there all day. So Lamaisi said, don't use those Arba Minim. He came, you don't know who he is, you can't even give back to him after Yomtiv. Like, what's the tzad? This could be a lulav of hagazel. The point is that we have to pay, like Mr. Burris, we have to pay before Yomtiv. Now I think there's also a Ben Adam Chaveira here that I should mention. Most moichrim are not big gevirim, this is their panasa, and as we know, it's not an easy job, it's quite difficult. At least we should have the menschlichkeit to pay on time. You look at the pasuk, the Gemara in Bav Metzia, Kuf Yud Aleph, of the choimer of not paying a worker on time. A love who noise is nafsha, he's moise nefesh to work for you, and you can't pay him on time. I do know that in Mechira there is no b'yayim tita and schorei. But it's the same attitude. This man is moise nefesh, literally, works hard day and night to make a panasa and help you also. And why should he come home empty-handed? So a Rav once told me that he also believes, like I do, that we should tell people to pay on time, before Yomtiv. But he says, people don't react too well when you say, Ben Adam Chaveira. So he says, you're not yoitza. Oh, that scares everybody. But the people that listen to me, I know, are wonderful people, and you react properly, Ben Adam Chaveira. So even if you can find a hetav zoy metazoy, But there cheret kadma l'Torah. There has to be a hiddur in lulav is when you satisfy the moicha kalocha. Now, l'mashal, I'll give you another mashal. We can work way out of it, but it's wrong. He says if someone bought it and he paid even a small amount, and the rest of it he was zoykif as a halva, so then he's kind of entirely because he made a kinyan kesef. So that would satisfy the chayshim mishpat issue. But the benam l'chaveroi, we should be careful to pay on time. A little of a bigger problem maybe when a moicha bought it from a big wholesaler or distributor. If he doesn't pay the distributor, so he has a chayv that's gazel. Now the emphasis is typically the big moichrim when they sell to the small, the customers. Then they not dafka want to have it before Yomtov. It's a lot of money, so you have to work that out. But remember, there's a hiddur in Arba Minim, and that's called hafter achka moicha. So a beautiful story. The stipler went to one with his anicle to buy a lulav for Yomtov, and he didn't like what he saw, so he walked out. Then he made a bout face and bought a lulav. So anicle says, the karla makar, what happened? I didn't like any of the lulav. But then I'm walking out. They're going to say, oh, you see. The Kanyevsky didn't buy any of them, none of them are good. Do I need that in my head, in my achrayas? So I bought one. Now, that's the end of the story, but I wondered, did he bench on that lulav that he bought, al sehiris and chayshim mishpat? I don't know if he did, but if he did, there was a very exquisite hiddur in a sosav and a sateh b'emunah. That also we have to keep in mind when we buy stam mitzvahs to do things with the chayshim mishpat, but the chaveri as well. The Mishnah in Taf Nun Dal Tzivka and Tezvav regarding matzah, he says if you don't pay the one that sold it to you, and you tell him Leich v'shoyev, come back tomorrow, then could be run you to the mitzvah of matzah. So it's something that we have to know. Bichlal in mitzvah especially, it should have the reach hatoiv of zehirus imirad lechaver. Next group of questions of how to pay. So the emphasis is obviously, cash is the best way. Even though I did see the Kinyan Torah, the Gimel Tzadik Aleph, he has someone asked him a tremendous chiddush, that maybe to make a Kinyan Goma, you have to have something that's shava kesef, like a gold piece or a silver dollar. But money, paper money, it's not worth much more than monopoly money, other than it's legal tender. But how much is the paper worth? So he felt you have to give, coins. That's also hard to understand. How much are coins worth? Lamaisa, paper money, in other words, $100 bills, etc., is fine. Checks is a sugya for itself. How do you look at checks? What's the status of a check? Is it a check gufay mammon like $100 bill? Or maybe it's a bona fide IOU. If it's an IOU, then you're not yoitza. So we discussed this at length. Bekitza, we did come out that a check is considered gufay mammon. Of course, if it's a check that doesn't bounce, we'll soon see about that. Head checks is much more problematic because right now it can't be cashed in a bank, but a regular check that the bank will cash it and the store will probably take it, that would be okay. Credit card also is a transfer of money, and that should be okay. The only problem is, as I told you, if the check bounces. So l'chayra, if the check bounced, you didn't pay, and especially the moicha of all things has to pay a penalty for the bounced check. So pashtis, bad news, the mitzvah also bounced because he wasn't paid. L'mafreya, I don't know if it's mafreya, or never was good. Rav Shlomo Zalman in the Askama to the Sefer Arba Minim has a chiddush gadol, and he says that basically the moicha is enraged, no doubt about it, but he's also practical. What is he thinking? He found out the check bounced. So what's he going to say? And therefore, I'm not being maknit to that ganef. I don't want him to have it. Right? So what are you going to gain? He's going to give it to you on Chalamoid. Oh, we heard you don't want me to make the sale. Okay, here, take it back. What are you going to do with your $300 minim set? You're going to put in your cholent for the last days of Yomtov? It's worthless. So he sort of says by default he has no choice but to be gomo makner, hopefully get the money on Chalamoid. Now that's a chiddush because the Pischei Choshen and Geneva Vov Sifid Zion points out, and probably the Rabbi Yashiv in the check Halacha Chel Beis Amataf Kuf Tezvav has the same problem, that when there's no gemir, when the check bounces and there was no monetary payment, how do you revive it? Because you want it later? In other words, when the moicha did not originally want to sell it when there's no money, it was possible. Not that he decided to make it possible. There was no payment of money. So they question Reb Shlomo Zalman's idea, if it works, that you really don't want it, but you have no other choice. Because if you didn't pay, so the mitzvah bounced, or the check bounced, the mitzvah bounced. How do you sort of revive that by just the fact that you want to get some type of payment later? So that's why, give a check that definitely clears. People like to have a betachin, emunah in their checks. Better have betachin when it comes to working on Chol Hamoed. Then you can say, I have betachin Hashem. But checks have to be covered. A check that bounced, like many paiskim, so does the mitzvah. I'll tell you an early Simchas Yomtov question. This I saw quoted from Rab Chaim. Someone, let's call him Balabas, owner of the Dalminim, gave it to the Leikeach to use the first day, and he gave a matanim and aslahachzer, and everything worked great. But the user is a shtikl cheverman. So when came time to give it back to the Balabas, he said, I'm giving you a matana, a manas lahachzer, and take it, but I want it back. So he was a lamdin, he thought he was. Well, since matana manas lahachzer is a Kinyan gomor, is it nesina gomor, so I'm yoitza my chazor. Now he has to give it back to me. I'll have a beautiful dalamina for the rest of Yomtov. So they asked Chaim, how do you work with this scoundrel? Chaim says very pashut. Take it from him and don't return it to him. Why? This way, lamaisa, his nesina to you wasn't a nesina, because he don't want to give it to you, you don't give it back to him. So it wasn't a nesina. So now look at that. Whose is it? So the one that's using it didn't give a chazara. So now his mitzvah bounced. So this way you could get back your dalet minim, and his mitzvah bounced. So hopefully he won't make that shtick on you. They say the Chazon Ish said that the whole shtick doesn't work, because when you say I want it back, I want a complete nesina, not a matana manas lahachzer. But Lamaisa, at least I wanted to show you that there is a concept of a nesina that bounces, a mitzvah that bounces in this type of case. A very tough question, and I'm not convinced that what if I'm saying is correct, but let's work together, is when someone took the wrong dalad minim, he took the kaishalach all look the same, and Lamaisa he benched on the first day on someone else's adasim, aravos, or both. Lamaisa he benched the first day on some of them are not his. He exchanged, typically we don't, lulav, you could recognize yours, but he took someone else's dalad minim. So Lamaisa, he's no bad intentions, but it's not his. Isn't certain halachem, and maybe shal shem das gazlanu. So if the question is, this is the Pharisee Gemara, because the Gemara in Sukkah Mem Beis Amud Beis, in a different context, that when people sometimes mixed up theirs with someone else's, malamdin oisam loima kamisha megil lavi liyadai harei b'matana. Let's say you're talking about a big besmedrish, there's hundreds of people, it's inevitable things get mixed up. So you come to shul with the hachlata that if someone takes mine, I'm giving them b'leiv shalim. So Zoke Yehuda Hayash in the Chuvas, in his Sefer Shayal Chuvas Beis Yehuda Cheli Beis Gimel Siman Ayin Gimel, the Mamas Safek Sheini. If this was a mix-up, and it's not a shul that you have this policy, if you mix up someone else's with yours, then you're giving him, he's giving yours. I don't see how you were yaitza. You took someone else, you made a bracha on someone else's, no lachem, and he says maybe even the rest of Yomtiv, where there's no psul of lachem, you're also not yaitza. I will soon see. There's a concept of nichalei leinish level mitzvah b'mamayne. He said that's when I give it to you. So you have certain responsibilities as a shoyel. So then I feel comfortable that you could use it. But here you didn't take it as a shoyel, and there's no achrayis. Why should I give my dalad minim to someone that has no legal responsibilities? So he's convinced that you're not yoitza even on the rest of Yomtiv. And the Kaf HaChaim and Taf Reish Nun Chesiv Kotan Tzadik Aleph quotes this, but he adds that the Erech HaShulchan, now there's an Erech HaShulchan, the Nevardik, and then this the Erech HaShulchan, the Svardi, he says, no, the first day taka, maybe taka not yaitza. But the rest of the days, who said that the Chiyav Oinsim is a Tanai? When you give someone, who said there's a Chiyav Oinsim? So maybe we could be makel by the rest of Yomtov. The question is, but on the first day, the case that someone took his son-in-law's Gazel and Minim, part of them at least. So even though they get along nicely, but he was a makta to his father-in-law, how you yaitza? So the Piskei Tshuvos sent me to a Berchas Habayis in Lamed Zayin Chav. What's the story there? There, another common case where lachem is really problematic, it has to be lachem, can't be someone else's, and that is when someone exchanged talesim with someone else. Yom Kippur, this happens all the time. There's a big oilam. So Bekitza, what he wants to say is that if you know that there was an exchange, you come to your seat, you have someone else's talis, and you put down your talis next to someone else, or whatever the case is, you know that basically you exchange with someone else. So you have a right to assume that even though the Gemara says in Bava Basra, that if you only had it, then it's chalfu kel bebeis hamerchatz, you can't take it because it's not yours. But in a case like a talis where you took his and he took yours, and you both have to be yoytz to the mitzvah, and you both can use someone else without rishus, so you can assume that it's an umdana that you're makna to someone else. So there's an automatic hakna that makes it work. Now the question is, so he wants to apply that to our case. But how do you create a lachem from this umdana, and he doesn't even realize until later? In other words, he took his son-in-law's and son-in-law took his. Fine. But no one knew b'shas ma'isa that they had exchanged it. How do you create a umdana l'mafreya? Now, plus, there is another big chilek between the Dalet Minim and Talis. Because as we'll soon see, that there's a Trumas Hadeshin that says you could use someone's Talis without Rishus, because Nichel Inis Be'ev Mitzvah. And as Trumas Hadeshin spells it out, as clear as can be, the same applies to Dalet Minim. Because people have no problem with someone else using the Dalet Minim. Now let's talk practical. Today in Tafshin Pei Hey, is there an automatic nichale? You have no problem with anybody using my Dalet Minim? Depends who it is. Maybe your son-in-law, yes. A stranger, especially if he gets very violent with his nanuim and he's out to turn oilamus over with his nanuim. But many people have said that I'm not so nichale with my Dalet Minim. Maybe things have changed today. So really it's risky. And I would definitely say the person that took someone else's Dalet Minim on the first day, if it's still the first day, get your own, locate your own, and shake again. Not to make a bracha, maybe you could say you were yoytz with the first time, hopefully, but stamp to rely on nichale and on a create a nichale, it's definitely better to bench on your own sometime the first day. Now, where I use this lamaisa, that makes more sense. I had the shayla lamaisa. Someone came to a seat, he went out to the bathroom and came back to Ne'ilah. He started Shemay Nesra. His mistake was he didn't check his talis before he started Shemay Nesra. In middle of Shemay Nesra, he checked his talis, and it wasn't his. So he says, there went my Ne'ilah. The whole thing I'm worrying. I'm going to soon say, and here I'm wearing someone else's talis. You should have checked before. But this happens all the time, because the place that you put your talis, so do 50 other people right before they're running out. So lamaisa, then we could say there's a nichale, because talis people are not so it's not so mafunik, unless you're real mafunik, especially if it's nischalfu. So nischalfu talisa is new. That's we can understand. But in Dalet Minim, I think it definitely kedai to take your own sometime that day. Now, in any case where it's a potential nischalfu, be a good yid and say, whoever has mine, I'm maknit to him. Belev shalom atanam anas lahachzer. So whoever gets it, whoever he has it, yours, whether it's a talis or certainly Dalet Minim, and you have that schus on your credit. That would be as far as nischalfu. There's another interesting question where someone asked this to me. He bought 4 hadas. He bought 3 hadasim naturally. He came home and he realized he took a 4th one by mistake. So he has 4 hadasim, 3 he paid for, and 1 is not his. So he's a shtickle of a frumma, and he said, well, one of them is Gazel, I didn't pay for it. Is there a din of bittul, Gazel and non-Gazel? It's not shishim. So the emes is, you could look at it differently. You bought 3 of them. Which ones? So that's your choice. The 4th one is not yours. So okay, so wrap it up and put it, keep it fresh, or go back and give it to the geshamish now, whatever you want to do. But you don't have to come on to bittul. You take 3, that's yours. The 4th one, you'll handle with care and either return it, or if you want to be smarter, decide to pay for it, and you'll pay for him after Yomtov. That's not an issue of lachem. And I saw the Shevet HaKasi in Chelik Dal, Kufay Dal, he speaks about aravos. He took an extra arav, but who adin? And he says, this cheshbon, put one to the side, use your 3, and there's no problem. It is probably kedai to either get it back to him in a time that he could sell it, or better yet, decide to pay for it. It's worthwhile. This way, you won't. He might have tainas. You give me on Yomtov, on Chalamoid, the hadas. I can't sell it now. One hadas. So to be extra careful, you could do that as well. Question: a person took someone else's dalet minim by mistake on Chalamoid, and he realized right away. Does he have to get his own? And number 2. Does he make a bracha because he took someone else's? So l'maisa, this is l'chayra a question of gzeila. Shal shalai midas, the Gemara says, is gazlan. He took someone else without rishus. The only question is, maybe we'll use the well-known yisoid of nichel inish meva mitzvah b'mayne. So this is pretty promising. The Chumas Hadeshin in 2 places, in Chelik Aleph Sim and Kuf, and Chelik Beis and Kuf Nun Tes, has the following shayla. Interesting. Even a bigger chiddush. He describes this case, a hot me to understand what exactly the story is, but someone was traveling, he's in a rush, he stopped off in a shul, just hopefully he wanted to mekayim the mitzvah, he didn't have his own dalet minim, and he saw laying on the table dalet minim, and there's no one in shul at the time. So he wanted to know, could he take dalet minim that belongs to someone, not him, shake it, make a bracha, put it back, and continue traveling. So he says, Yera de Shapedami. Why? Because there's a concept of nichel inish meva mitzvah b'mayne. People are overjoyed if you do a mitzvah with their money. And he has 3 examples when it works. Someone else's talis without rishus, tefillin, and dalet minim. What doesn't work, contrary to public opinion, is to use someone's sefer without rishus. And he explains, because dalet minim you use and you put it back. Sefer, you learn it, and you have a kasha and a teret, you get all involved, and you use it for an extended period of time, and it might get torn. And indeed, in Shulchan Aruch, we find, in Hilchos Tzitzis, you're allowed to use someone's talis without rishus, Hilchos Tefillin, someone else's Tefillin. There are more in Tough Reish Mem Tes Hey, you could use someone else's without, the rest of the day, the rest of Yomtiv, without rishus, because Nichle Inish. And Mr. Bura says that since you'll do it carefully, it won't get ruined. So believe it or not, by dalet minim is a din, in one of the kadmonim, the Chumas Hadeshin, it's quoted in the Ramah. So the chayra, this would be a perfect heta. If you're allowed to use l'chatchila without rishus, so if in the schalfu you use someone else's, so not the end of the world. We could say nichle le'inish. Now the question is, how did the other person? He didn't know you took without rishus. But that's the mechanics of nichele, that as if he gave rishus. Now, you don't have to worry about gezela, because it's not gezela, because nichele le'inish. L'maisa nichele doesn't make it lochem. True. The first day of Yomtov it won't work, because it's not lochem. But at least it's not a question of gezela. Now, l'maisa, this is a big sugya. As I told you, Gabbai svarim. If today some say today's a little better, people don't mind. But l'maisa, if you took someone's dalet minim without rishus, and the rest of Yomtiv, with no din of lachem, it's okay. Someone had an interesting ma'aseh shahaya. His aravos were dried, the last day of Chalamoid. His aravos were already dried, but he didn't want to buy new ones, but he decided to be a cheverman. And he saw the shamish, the Gabbai, was selling aravos. So he took 2, shook it, and put it back. Save money. So that, there's no nichle. Rav Moshe in Chelik Beis, Kuf Zayin, he says, to take the b'moiches without reshus and rely on nichalei, he's not nichalei. He has to make panasam. And Moshe, as you want to take the moich's private dalad minim set, das yeah. But business is business. Mitzvahs are mitzvahs. Business are business. So let's not get too aggressive. Lamaisa, the biggest raya is that the poskim say even when you have a het of nichalei, it's kedai when shaykh to get reshus. In other words, if you want to borrow someone's house and he's in the other room learning, he finished davening, so ask him. So why don't you go over to the sham and say, I want to borrow your aravos for a few minutes because I don't want to pay, spend money. Would you give it to me? He'll give you a psak, right? So that doesn't work. A psul that might go unnoticed which is common, is let's say arava is typically they have a child selling arava. See, dalad minim, lulav, esrig, and hadasim is a little more delicate, and also you have to know halachos, so the bailam is there. But often they have aravos and they sell a child selling it. The chayra, even if you pay him fully, so you made your kinyan, but the question is, how did you get it from the cotton to you? You see, the big problem, which is that we discussed the whole share for itself, but the big problem of giving your dal minim to a cotton on the first days of Yomtov is not for the cotton. The cotton's fine. He could be kainit and shake, but he can't be maknit. He can't transfer. He doesn't have the ability to give. So the father gives it to his son. The son's kaina and yaitza, but not the father. The same problem exists here also. How does the vendor, that cotton, give you the aravos? And oy bazoi, to buy haishanas from a cotton, there's no problem. To buy aravos on chalamoid and the rest of the yomtiv is no problem. But the first days, what has to be lachem, you have to be kainit, but there's no makna to give it to you. And the truth is, if you want to have an early Simchas Yomtov or on Simchas Yomtov, take a look at the Ksaf Soif and Archaim, Siman Chav Ches, a beautiful tshuva. He discusses this whole inyan of buying from Ketanim, Ayin Sham, but we have a big agenda still, so let's get to the point. There's no doubt about it. If this cotton is an industrious child, and he had reshus, and he went to someone's aravos tree, where he went to place of hefka, and he cut the aravos, and it became his because he was kainit, and he wants you to give, and you want him to give you those aravos, it doesn't work. If it's his, he can give it to you. That's the given. The reason why sometimes people allow Ketanim to sell aravos is because it doesn't belong to the cotton. It belongs to the moicha. The child is a human vending machine. Can you buy aravos from a vending machine? Why not? Who are you being kainit from? The owner. So if he gets a human vendor, why is it worse? The chinuch that the Rabbi Gabbai in the Sefer Chafei Ches, he brings a Ksaf Soif and he says, but if it belongs to the balabas, the moicha, he says it's no different than if the moicha has to step out for a few moments and he leaves on the table and says, if you would like to buy it, sure, leave the money and go. Why? Because the bailam is being moicherit and the bailam is being maknit. But lemaisa, again, if it belongs to the cotton, you have to be careful. Now, I once saw something that bothered me. So there were children that they were selling ringlach that they made. And someone needed a whole bunch of them. And they told them the price. Go, no, it's too much. I'll give you this and that's it. So, there's no dinner lachem by the ringlach. That's why you could buy koishiklach from Ketanim. But there's a Gazel by Ketanim. If he doesn't want to sell it because you scared him because you're 3 times his size. So, there's no mechila by Ketanim. So you have to remember the Chayshim Mishpat and the Menschlichkeit, that's Madrega Aleph. The Poskim question, let's say you get someone selling and he's by mitzvah. But you don't know if he has Takish Day Cyrus, if he's really a mitzvah Bacham Midaraisa. He doesn't have a beard, what do you do? So the Emes Ramah and Chayshim Mishpat Siman Reish Ayin Siv Beis, he says there's another problem. Not regarding Dal Minim per se, but let's say he is a gadol and he has a nice beard, so he's a gadol midaraisa. The problem is he's saimach hashulchan aviv, and the halacha is that mitzvah of a benoi goes to the father. So this is a problem. I saw there's a beautiful discussion. Say for Arba Minim Amid Taf Ayin Hey, he quotes Rav Sraya Devalitsky, and other Paiskim, Rabbi Yitzchak Zilberstein. But to make a long story short, it's pretty much of an issue if Lamaisa, what he has belongs to his father. So let's say that that big boy, he has a beard already, he's bar mitzvah deraisa, cut his own dalet minim, cut his own aravos, and is selling it, it belongs to the father. So one simple eitzah would be, if the father says, listen, you're doing business, it's all yours. So he released whatever ownership he had. What also works is, some poskim say, brings it there, that mitzias benoi goes to the father. But ma'aseh yadav that he works on, and here he's working hard to sell it, maybe they never belong to the father. So lemaisa, what I would say is, if someone wants to sell aravos, and he knows his father gave him reshus, he should put up a sign, lochem mohudar. Now people won't know what that is, but they'll think it's some type of hiddur, and they'll pay extra for that. But make it lochem mohudar, and then you're good to go. Me'adam uzmanim chelik vav memhei has another tzad to be makel. Some say it's an automatic umdun of the father, even if he didn't say it, he meant it. But lemaisa, make sure that the aravos are fully lochem. A big question, which now needs clarification, is, it was yadua, and today you don't see it as much, but we saw it when we were younger, that the shul had dalet minim. The big shul especially had a dalet minim set, or 2 sets. How does that work? So the emes is that we find something similar regarding talis. Talis has to be yours. Talis shul you don't make a bracha on, but the shul talis you do. What's the pshat? Because the shul talis, each member has a bailus in it, so it is enough to make a bracha on. You borrow a talis, that you don't make a bracha, unless he's makneh to you. So here, the chayra, that's probably why Tosfos, as early as Tosfos, Aleph Beis, and Al Sugya, Tosfos says that the reason why the shul dalet minim works is because each person has a bailus on it, because he chipped in, and there's like a sort of an automatic umdana that when you're using it, when Reuven is using it, everybody's giving their chelik to Reuven. Then Shimon uses it, it's Shimon's entirely. So it's an automatic, like the mechanics of matana manas lahachzer. So therefore, when Pliny uses it, it's fully his. Now, that is quoted in Shulchan Aruch Taf Reish Nun Ches Sif Tes. This is why the Mishnah Berurah writes emphatically in Sifkat Lamed Ches on this halacha, it's not advisable to use the shul's dalet minim. Why? Because you have to rely that every person is enough Talmid Chacham to know that he's giving you his. Every person has to make him a ton of masla hachzer. I'm a ratzim, never heard of this, don't know anything about this. So you're risking it not being yours. So Mr. Berurah says, if you don't have dalet minim, go to a yachid who knows halacha and say, can I borrow yours for the first day? I'm nasla hachzer. He gives it to you, belev shalom kinyan gomer, and he knows that he has to take it back for you, b'teres matana, and then you yaitza. But lemaisa, to take it from a shul's dalet minim is a problem. Now, lemaisa, today's shul dalet minim works differently, if you still have it. It's not that everybody chips in, because no one could afford it. The shul buys one, and they give it to, I guess they give it to the Gabbai. So perhaps that has a little easier, because the Gabbai is the bailam. He's representing the shul. And perhaps he has the right to give it to Matanos Lahachs to anybody that wants it. That's why even if someone comes who's not part of the Kehillah, he didn't chip into this dalet minim. If that's the way it works, then we can understand the Gabbai, the Shamish, he's considered enough of a controller, the apotropos, we'll call it, that he could say, I'm giving it to everybody, I'm an aslahachzer. But lemaisa, one thing we have to say, when you're using someone else, especially if you're using a shul's, it has to be a real kinyan, not a zogachs. There has to be a kinyan that the one that's taking it is making, and then the bailam has to re-coin it afterwards. Again, it should be almost demeaning for the balabas. He bought a very expensive set, and he's waiting for a matana from the ani that can't afford it. But again, the Ramah makes a point of saying there has to be a complete Kinyan Goma B'Taris Matana back to the Bailam. Now, since Kinyan is important, let me just speak a little bit about the Kinyan. Lamaisa, the Paiskim say that the one that wants to be Yoitza, well, I can't say he's a Shoyel, he's not a Shoyel, but the person that's a Kona, we'll call him, the Kona has to make a Kinyan. And L'chatchila, he should pick it up 3 Tvachim, so that's a Kinyan. The Kapis Tamarim and Sukkos Lametes says, maybe you should pick it up twice. First time L'Shem Kinyan, Second time, l'shem mitzvah. And other paiskim say the same thing. There is a big makom l'chalek that l'gabi the mitzvah of dal minim. What's wrong with the first picking up? Why can one hagbah be good for both? Especially some holds no din of picking it up. The ik is it should be in your hand. So the Maisa will say, I'm not going to be machri, of course, but if you're talking about the first day of chashash deraisa, better do it twice. If you didn't do it twice, or certainly those that make a bracha on their own dalad minim, and later take someone else's a more chashiv set, so basically you eat with the first. So lemaisa could be you don't need a special kinyan, but definitely when you do want to be kainit. If you're taking the Rebbe's dalad minim, so obviously you're doing it for a reason, so you have to be kainit. So try to be kainit in the same manner to make a real kinyan. Now lemaisa, the paiskim also discuss that if you have to make a tanai, does it have to be a tanai kafel with all hilchais tanai? And again, there are different shitas. Rav Sternbuch, for those that want to have a nechei the gimel, kuftzad a gimel, dal kuflan tes has a whole tanai that works out perfectly how to say it. But it's more mistaver that you don't need a tanai gomer with all hilchais tanayim, because lamaisa, we'll soon see, and we saw earlier, there's an umdana that works even without any dib at all. So as long as we know he's giving it to you, and it's understood, he says, I'm an asla hachzer, so who said you have to have kol hilchas tanayim? So basically, again, do it right, you want to make a tanai, koid lamaisa, hein koid malav, but basically the ik is to make a kinyan on both ends. The paiskim wonder, in fact, how could it be, since you have to have a kinyan gama, on Yomtov, you know how to make kinyanim? Magen Avram in Shin Vav Lamed Gimel, the Magen Avram, sorry, is in Sifkat and Tez Vav, Mishbur is in Sifkat Lamed Gimel, that says that on Yomtov you can't make kinyanim. So how could you have two kinyanim? The Teretz is Pashit. The same Magen Avram says, the Tzarech Shabbos v'Yomtov, you're allowed to make a kinyan. No, this is a Tzarech Shabbos v'Yomtov. Someone asked me, listen, you make a bracha on your own dal minim the first day. You want to be from, so you take someone else's afterwards. You were yoitz with the first one. The Raya made a bracha on it, right? So where's the tzarech yomtiv? The teretz is, the ma'aseh is a tzarech yomtiv, because you want to be comfortable, you have someone else's. And the Chutshani in Sukkos Yuzayin Vav says just that. Since there's a good reason, you're not doing it stam in the Velterein, it would be enough of a tzarech yomtiv. Now, lemaisa, if someone has dried up aravos and he wants to buy from the shamish, but it's yomtiv. So here, you have to be careful, do it correctly. The Shulchan Aruch and Shin Chav Gimel, which sometimes comes up in a bungalow colony, someone ran out of wine or grape juice. So he goes to the owner of the store and says, I don't have wine. Okay, just take whatever you want. We'll talk about it. Don't worry about it later. Don't worry. You're allowed to sell something at Shabbos and Yom Tiv, but don't speak about how much and with the price. So basically, Zakta Master Shekel, you're allowed to take from someone, aravos, but don't make a kinyan out of it. Don't look, Sham, I'll pay you whatever it is, don't worry, just let me take it. Just say, I need it, he'll say, just take it, don't worry, we'll talk about it later, don't worry. So don't turn it into a real kinyan, because a real kinyan on Yom Tiv, on Shabbos, is awesome. A challenging question that I need your help is the following. I told you earlier that his favorite mitzvah he likes to give is Dal Minim the first day to people to bench. And he tells you, Beferish, he was not coin it after they gave it back to him. He never heard of this. I'm an asla hachzim, he has to be coin it. As I told you earlier, if someone gave you dalat minim, you used his and gave it back to him, but he didn't have in mind, even subconsciously, to be coin it, was he yoytz of the mitzvah? To be halach in Taf Mem Ches, Sid Gimel, talking about chametz, but he said the farish, if the one that gave it away did not have kavana to be coin it back, so you can't be yoytz lulav either. He's talking about other things, but lulav also. It doesn't work. Now, here I would like to make a point. The Shulchan Aruch and Taf Reish Nun Ches Sif Hey, actually it's a lifesaver. Let's say someone comes over to you the first day, he's desperate. Can I use your dal minim? He says, sure, okay, because he's nervous. So you give it to him. That was the end of the conversation. You didn't say a word about masla hachza. So how is he yoytza? So the Shulchan Aruch says, quoting Iran, the Ran says when you give someone the dalmin the first day, you're not giving it to lose your mitzvah. You're not giving him forever, or else you're not going to have a mitzvah. You want it to be yoytza. So even though you didn't stipulate, there's an umdana, you did it kal pi halacha. So although you didn't say the words, amanas lahachzer, he won't give it me at the first day, and he's a Talmid Chacham, it goes. No. Now I'll ask you a question. So if he never knew, where's the umdana? And the Bekur Yankiv and Taf Reish Mem Tes Sif Katan Tezvav, he says if Lamaisa, if he says he wasn't kinda taking it back, so he was never Yaitza. Now the one that borrowed it, quote unquote, Amas Lahachzer, was Yaitza, but the Bailim was not Yaitza. Now I'll add a little more of a hezbah. The Aruch HaShulchan wonders if it's automatic umdana. So why do we say Shaul is puzzle umdana the first day? So the Pashta teretz is when you didn't make you said the first, I want to borrow it for a few moments. But could be the teretz is that when Shaul is puzzle the first day, when you gave it to him without knowing that you have to get it back. Or he didn't know he has to be kainit. He thought he was just borrowing it. In either case, if the person took the mitzvah, whether it's the giver or the taker, and didn't have a mind to be kainit a Kinyan Gama, they're not yaitza. I hope I'm wrong, but tell me why I'm wrong. If he says he never had a mind to be kainit his dalminim back, so he wasn't kainit. So we have to hope maybe he knew a little bit subconsciously, I don't know, but l'chayra, this is a problem. Now, this is why the Paiskim say, they're actually based on Ramah and Taf Reish Nun Ches, that when someone has a choice, better buy your own. Don't rely on manas lahachzer. And the Magen Avraham says a pretty sharp lashon, because Roi b'nei Adam don't know how to make Kinyanim properly. Now, the Magen Avraham is based on Hagoy's Maimon, the end of Hilchas Lulav, and a Maril in the Manhagim Shin Sadik Zayin, where they both say that even though Shul's Es Dalminim work, but buy your own, and they both give two reasons. Number one, you might not do Amanas Lahachza properly, and number two, even if you do it properly, you're not going to have the Dalminim for the Nanuim. So that's why the Ramah concludes our Simon, buy your own. Now this is true. Reb Sternbuch in Chelik Beishin tells us a novel reason to buy your own. He says, even though the one that you're borrowing from someone else is nicer than yours, but yours has a hiddur al pi Torah. What's the hiddur? Lachem. Now that's a big chiddush. It sounds great, but it's a big chiddush because the Grace Maimoni, the Mariel don't say that the lachem's a hiddur. You know why? If I get a real manas lahachzer, it's also a hiddur. It's also lachem. So I think it's just al pi derech drush. But one thing I will say, that the Ramah concludes emphatically, don't rely on borrowing, buy your own. And that's why Taka, although it works, buy your own. The only question is, people, they take other people, they shake it, that's not a kasha, because they made a bracha on their own. They have their own, they're just shaking. The chiddush is, some chassidim especially, they make on the first day, even the first day, on the Rebbe's Daled Minim, and they don't make the bracha on their own, they make it on the Rebbe's Daled Minim, or Rav, whatever wants to do the first day. So the emphasis, the could be the chilek is pashut. On a shul's Daled Minim, you have to rely on everybody being maknit to you, like I told you, and very often not everybody knows. But if whoever's handling the Gabbai Shamash, and he knows what he's doing, if he's giving it to every single person a complete amas lahachzer, so you have lochem, and then you'll have your own for the nanuim. Okay, but make sure someone's in a long line and they rush. So if they make, one after the other, and not everybody gets a complete amanas lahachzer attention, so you're not yaitza, so be careful. The Maril, in that same shtickle, adds that Lamaisa, even when Yomtov chal b'Shabbos, so there's no din of lachem, make sure you buy Daled Minim, because the second day also has to be lachem, who reminds us that in Chutz La'aretz it's both days. Let me just leave you with two quick points. I told you earlier the problem of a katan on the first day is because the katan can't be maknit. Some raise the question, how about a gadol? You give it to your boy who has a nice long beard. But Lamaisa, how is he yoitzu with yours? What's wrong? Because since Lamaisa, whatever the katan has, whatever the boy has, is the father has also, so he got a matana gemura from his father. So how does that work? Now it goes back to the father. So some say that you should give it to your son almanas. I have no chelik in it. Some say it's understood. So, but the Maisa, you want to be extra from, you could say beferish, but here it has to be, this is an umdana. You want that the child should be kaina. And the last question, something to think about, because I hope to give a share about Nashim B'chlal and Dalet Minim. How is someone's wife be Yaitza with the mitzvah? I'll leave you with a question, but don't bring it home. The question is, since Lamaisa, everything belongs to the husband, she's the boss and he's the bala boss, but Lamaisa comes Dalet Minim, he's talking to the bala boss. So how's she Yaitza? So you have to give it to her. Yeah, but whatever she gets, I get. It goes back to me. Right? So Teretz is the same das. But the issue here is when, let's say, the husband comes home late and the Isha wants to bench and eat or something before, early. So she takes her son-in-law's Dalet Minim. So how did that work? The son-in-law gives it to the mother-in-law. Right away, it's Kinyan. The husband's Kinyan. Matthias, whatever the Isha, whatever, at least some of the Nichsim goes to the husband. So here, the Pashta Cheshbon. What belongs to the wife goes to the husband because it's hers. What was given her to do a mitzvah does not go to the husband at all. So it's only hers. But the chiddush is when you want your wife to Yaitza Mahadrin, give it to Matana Gemura, but don't explain why. I couldn't Yomtov to you all.
Shame I'd like you to give a shakayach to us for today's share. To have the great sponsoring a share, call Ignish Terra 718-851-8651, email ist@yeshivanet.com. Kanaanya ben akashe motzei Baruch Hu lezakas Yisrael. Figure hebel to mitzvah shnema al neichofes and mantzidka yagdol ter v'yader.
Amen. Amen.
We're not yet to the share, we have to seek him, that's for sure.
The share is Amanas Lahachzer. Okay, just so that's what we learned today. The first days in Chutz La'aretz has to be Lachem. It's a Psul Deraisa, Lav Dafka, Lulav, any of the Dalet Minim has to be Lachem. Of course, if one is missing, so the mitzvah is missing. The Zehiris by the aravos to make sure you pay and pay properly and don't handle, because sometimes Lachem is lacking when you don't pay Kafi the Ratzin of the Moicham. Gazel is the most serious psul, it's puzzle all 7. The chiddush is that even though Shaul does not work, it's possible the Raisa. Matana Manas Lahachza, Matana Gemura does work if it's done right. You have to give it to the person, to the Keach, we'll call him Kin Gomer, and then the giver, the Balabas, has to make a new Kinyan. Use and give it back, Matana Manas Lahachza, that's because both have the full Kinyan b'shas the mitzvah. The Matana Manas Lahachza needs 2 full Kinyanim, and basically, as far as the paying is concerned, pay before Yomtov, pay lechatchila fully. If partially you can't do it, at least pay partially, because also be another chaver cheshbon that should make a hiddur in the mitzvah of Dalet Minim. The other kinyanim don't work if there's no kesef, because kesef is a kinyan deraisa, and you want to have a mitzvah deraisa, so you have a kesef deraisa. And basically cash, a good check, credit card is fine, a head check, some question if it's good, most question is good, because right now it's valueless, but a check that bounced, it's pretty reasonable that the mitzvah bounced as well, so certainly try to get a mechila, hopefully it works mafreya, like some. If you took someone else's Dalet Minim, you could be yoitza, but I would advise to try to get your own that day, to be yoitza l'chem l'chol hadeyis. The first day, get it Dalet Minim and don't make another bracha. You could hopefully rely on there's an umdan that goes both ways. But if both swapped and both are aware that they exchange one with the other, then you have more of a tzad to be makel. But again, take it over again that same day. In a case where took an extra hadas, arav, or whatever it is, so they're not all gezulam, just one was not yours, so put that to the side and use the ones that you have. Nichale works by talis, tefillin, and Gazel Minim, like the Chumas Hadeshin and Shulchan Aruch. Some question today, so basically probably the eighth would be pick it up and make it gentle, and anuam, not a very violent one. But there's no nicha taken from a person that's selling, from a Gabbai, a vendor, because he wants money, not mitzvahs. A cotton that sells his own, you can't buy it from him because he can't be maknet to you. So make sure you get a different aravos, but it's only the first day. But the rest of the days, on Hoshana Rabbah, of course, there's no question. If the child is a vendor, he's selling for someone else, there's no problem. But mitzvah boy, even if he has a chsima zokin, he's a real gadol. But basically, if he took the aravos on his own, and it was his, it goes to the father, so hopefully the father should tell him, whatever you sell is yours to sell, and yours to keep the money. To make a lachem mahudar, that's important by Gazel and Minim. The shul's original minig was pretty problematic, each one had to be maknit. Today's shul is basically given to, I guess the Gabbai gives it to everybody, so that's probably a little easier, but we still, lachatchila, we should have a real, your own Gazel and Minim. And if you want to use someone else's, in any case, pick it up Gimel Tvachim, a second time is even better. But basically, you don't need Tanai B'nai God, but speak it out. Even if he didn't speak it out, B'di'evet, he's Yaitza, it's automatic. The only problem is if he doesn't know that he has to be kainit. And basically, as we said, the hither is buy your own and spend money on it. Fakert, the Arizal says you're not supposed to take a mitzvah for free, don't borrow it. You make a bracha on your own or make a bracha on someone else's, but make sure it's a complete matana manas lahachos. Yeah. Which case you do?